Coming up on today's Next Fan Up podcast.
You had a drunk guy on?
I'm mistaken. Edit to make me not look stupid. Oh, how'd that get in there? It's Super Bowl 55. Here we go.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry, hold on.
32 super fans.
I couldn't understand a word they were saying.
One pod vader.
You fired up for that, man? Huh?
Every angle of the NFL covered.
We on go time. We still on go.
This is Next Fan Up.
We're live, bro.
Hello and welcome to the We Didn't Blow Out the Budget edition of Next Fan Up podcast. It is our Super Bowl coverage for Super Bowl LV, also known as 55. But the guy who gave me flack for going to numbers and Roman numerals is not here to give me flack. Neil is off salmon fishing. How dare he? Where is his priorities? This is the game. This is where it's all at. Fortunately, James, my good, reliable super fan representing the Eagles, is here. Hello, James.
Hello, Pod. Hello, Doc. And, briefly before we get into the whole minutia of stats and bashing Neil and Doc's recipes in this game, I do briefly want to take 60 seconds and address something that's going on in the NFL, or at least dealing with the NFL we did not touch on last week. And that is former Seahawks tackle Chad Wheeler and where he finds himself right now, and the egregious, horrible beating of his girlfriend to the point to where she thought and he thought that he had killed her and had zero remorse for calling 911 or anything. Later comes out that he suffers from bipolar, and whether that's an issue or not, he needs to get that checked out. But the fact that most media sports outlets, ESPN and NFL Network, didn't even mention this on air until Nate Burleson mentioned it at the end of a show last week, right before closing. And then all of a sudden, all the other big sports networks picked it up. Totally egregious in the coverage. This is in the same vein of Ray Rice and Greg Hardy, in which the story stayed in the cycle until justice was done to both of them as far as never playing it down in football and whatever the legal system threw at them. And the same thing needs to happen to Chad Wheeler. And whether that means he's thrown in some type of psychic institution, he gets jail time, this needs to stay in the news cycle until justice is done. It is egregious that it wasn't reported on initially when it happened on television. Yes, there were articles written about it, but the fact of, I'm not going to go into all the details, but just look at the pictures of what he did to this young woman.
Yep.
Feared for her life and everything. This is the most heinous thing that I've seen in some time. And it needs to be spoken of more often. The Seahawks, like I said, have cut him completely. He was a restricted free agent. That has now been completely dumped. He is no longer with the team in any way, shape, or form. Of course, they released a statement to cover their own rear ends. But yeah, I definitely wanted to put that out there because I want to apologize for our show because we should have mentioned this last week. We didn't. But I definitely want to get that out the way before we get into all the Super Bowl talk.
We've actually been veering away from reporting on all of that stuff because it's such a downer. But you're right. The man needs to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law based on the information that we have. And the information that we have is pretty damning. So thank you, James.
It's black and white, man. I will, thank you first off for bringing it up. For me, having relativity to this, friends, etc., I just do not understand why Coach Pete did not take a leadership role in this thing. It's got to be headlines because this goes on far more than we ever cover in the NFL. And this one should have been front and center because it is black and white, mental illness aside. Bipolar, which I've had to deal with in my family, but still, James, you hit it on the head. It should have been covered. It's about as egregious as a KC offensive coordinator we're going to talk about in a different way because this is life and death. But hats off to you for bringing it up. Amen.
All right, let's get back to more fun stuff like giving Neil flack for not being on the biggest podcast
really.
of the year.
Absolutely.
Going
fishing. Jesus Christ, son.
You might as well watch the Puppy Bowl. What are you doing, Neil?
No. First of all, we do not acknowledge that atrocity whatsoever.
No, we actually did. If you listen to the prop bet, I had to put in our social media that people betting on the Puppy Bowl should definitely look into gambling services.
Prop bet
that is a problem.
Bowl. Ladies and gentlemen, we have officially hit rock bottom.
That is a sickness. It is a sickness. And I think it was your namesake, James, our Texan super fan, talking about the Puppy Bowl. You might understand why he's talking about the Puppy Bowl and not his team.
Really.
Well, I understand why he's talking about it. I don't understand why you're talking about it.
Well, I'm saying Neil's punishment is he's not allowed to watch football. He has to watch the Puppy Bowl. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, man.
What is wrong with you, Scott?
If we're going to tie him to a chair and not allow him to get up, then yeah, absolutely. Make him watch the Puppy Bowl and not the Super Bowl. Tell him about it later.
Who would deprioritize Who would deprioritize the Super Bowl, son? Jesus, wake up! Jesus Christ, salmon fishing, just salmon fishing.
Neil would be giving Doc flack for his terrible Scottish accent. But Doc is more reliable. Doc, our new good friend, who's been with us every week through the NFL season this year, coined this NFL therapy once a week. Thank you, Doc, for showing up, unlike Neil, who's been with us for over 5 years now and can't show up for the Super Bowl show.
The only excuse I would let him have is if he's getting a shot in the arm. He's finally getting his vaccine or something. It's like, come on, man. Does the vaccine
have fish oil in it? Is that the deal? Is that what's going on?
Salmon.
I don't know. We've got lots of things to talk about. We're going to talk about head coaches and the lack thereof. We're going to talk about ginormous, and I do mean ginormous, quarterback trade that everybody knows about by now and how that's going to have an effect on the whole quarterback carousel this offseason. But, of course, we have the big game, the Super Bowl, number 55, and let us set the stage. And in doing so, we do so with my totally useless stats. Yes, they're back. Totally useless stats. I have so many useless stats, some of them not so useless. But in this particular case, the whole setting the stage, I mean, they are what they are.
Pod, this is like a 5-page book report, man.
No. Right now, I see only 3 paragraphs here. Okay. Including the postseason, Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes with an .830 winning percentage and quarterback Tom Brady with a .767 winning percentage have the highest and third highest winning percentages amongst starting quarterbacks with a minimum of 50 starts since 1950. Super Bowl 50 is the first Super Bowl between the starting quarterbacks who won each of the 2 most recent Super Bowls. Mahomes won Super Bowl 54. Brady won Super Bowl 53. And it is the first Super Bowl between starting quarterbacks who have each won at least one AP Most Valuable Player award and one Super Bowl Most Valuable Player award prior to the matchup. That's pretty impressive.
Very.
But, of course, that's going to happen when you have the GOAT and the youngster. Speaking of which, Brady at 43 years, 188 days old on Super Bowl Sunday, and Mahomes, 25 years, 143 days old, are set to have the largest age differential of 18 years, 45 days between opposing starting quarterbacks in Super Bowl history. And that's going to continue, as Brady says he plans on playing until he's 85. The Chiefs and Buccaneers previously met at Raymond James Stadium in Week 12. And by the way, I think Week 12 is going to become a theme in this particular show. They had 807 passing yards, the most combined passing yards between 2 opposing quarterbacks in a single game in 2020. Wide receiver Tyreek Hill registered 269 receiving yards and 3 touchdown catches in the contest and became the 3rd player with at least 200 receiving yards in a single quarter since 1980. The Bucs have won each of their past 7 games, including the postseason, since Week 12, while Kansas City enters the Super Bowl having won 12 straight games started by Mahomes, including the postseason. Those are all my setting the stage stats, guys. Did you want to include anything?
Fantastic. No.
Mahomes' playoff career, only one quarterback has beat him.
By the name of Tom Brady.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it.
However, Tom Brady's also lost to Patrick Mahomes.
Well, hey, listen, it almost happened in last Super Bowl. You know, I'm sorry he wasn't my MVP last Super Bowl. I think I'm not the only one who thinks that, but eventually everything that shimmers, according to that rock band Fuel, one of my faves, is sure to fade away. So when will that happen? Why not against the GOAT? Right?
Before we bring in Chief Superfan Nick to really break down some of the matchups from a minutia standpoint, Doc, you have a whole bunch of things to set the stage from an eating standpoint.
Well, on request, you know, we all want to get everybody ready because I think this will be the most watched Super Bowl of all time. Us obviously being restrained to our houses. So the first thing I will say is a little bit of a disclaimer. We've given you a crap load of resources on Slack, but I would like to say this to anybody who downloads this podcast. If you do not have the capabilities nor are willing to cook at home, this is the day to break bread. It is the largest home gating day of the year for the nation's number one sport and the single largest media day in the world. Then go out and patronize all those beautiful sports bars and restaurants that are just crap in the bed. There's nothing that they can do but give you good food. Please go patronize those guys and try and keep them in business because we love our sports bars and pubs, but they're hurting. So if you can't fix up these specially selected recipes and helpful hints for a great Super Bowl party at home, get some takeout and patronize your local sports bar. That's my public service statement for the day. Now, on to food, gentlemen. I don't know what you do on Super Bowl Sunday, but it's kind of my Christmas. And so it all goes back to my original phrase from my forthcoming national radio program, Tailgate Homegate Nation. Our term, excess in moderation. Don't have a couple of beers after work every day, you know, wait for the weekend and get a case and have a story kind of thing. So the same thing applies to a lot of the recipes we posted. And we have new inventions that I came up with. As you guys know, I like to pair up, I should say, the Super Bowl teams, just like we did. Last week was an amazing run of chicken wings 2 weeks ago under Josh Allen's name, his favorite chicken wing recipe, which was Cajun honey butter. So we did a version of that and we're going to publish that. And so these recipes are all inspired by coaches or players. Number one, we got a homemade ketchup recipe up there in honor. We call it the Patrick Mahomes made homemade ketchup. If you ever make ketchup at home, you'll know how good it can be compared to the stock brands. But there's a homemade ketchup recipe, which is great with any fried foods. We've got the Andy Reid story. It's called Mo Betta Beef and Cheddar. And it's a highly stacked roast beef sandwich with bacon and mushrooms and adobe mayo. It is delicious. And it was all inspired by my favorite sports bar in Pittsburgh. Fatheads, shout out to them. But Andy Reid loves the hunch. And my guy who did my original voiceover for my national radio program, Guy Fieri, on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, you can catch that episode, and Coach Andy Reid knows how to hunch. So we gave you a nice big fat Mo Betta beef and cheddar sandwich recipe there that is delicious for your Sunday. Easy to make. Number two, because of the famous phrase of the week, no risk it, no biscuit, Coach Bruce Arians, we've created my lovely Southern biscuit recipe with cheddar and chive. So we're appropriately calling them Coach's no risk it, no biscuits, and they're cheddar and chive or cheddar and scallion biscuits. So if you like to make homemade biscuits, these are delicious. I did the recipe last week and we published that. And then, of course, we will reiterate, if you haven't done so, Pod, you can chime in here at any time. We do have a wonderful cookbook from one of our rising star chefs in North America. The gastro guru himself, Mr. Jeremy Parsons, has provided Next Fan Up Nation with a cookbook called Invite, with a plethora, a spasmodic cornucopia of recipes for cocktails on game day and gatherings. We've got several recipes up there for your Super Bowl breakfast nachos from that book, and 2 cocktails that we absolutely love for game day. The one is my favorite, the Smokehouse Bloody Mary. If you love Bloody Marys as an opening day cocktail for Super Bowl, this one's got a savoriness that I've never tasted a Bloody Mary like this. So you got a Smokehouse Bloody Mary up there. And of course, another one, I don't know if there's any relation to anything we're talking about here, but Happy Cow.
I was going to ask the Happy Cow, which looks delicious.
It is.
Who likes chocolate milk?
I know.
Who's the chocolate milk aficionado?
I know. Irish cream, chocolate milk, coffee, maple syrup. Boy, your garnishes are funny. You know, your mini Oreo cookie. Anyways, they are all delicious recipes. Just thought we'd throw some great ideas out there, and then I'll finish up with our last little helpful hint there was from my friend, one of the top man cave designers in the world. She has built man caves for the top CEOs of Starbucks and Versace, and she's one of my home getting decor experts. Now, I'm not into the frou-frou stuff, all right, but she gives a wonderful little interview to me about how to make your Super Bowl fun and exciting, from converting your driveway to your front door into goalposts. A couple of pictures there on, how to jack up the decor elements from curb to couch, from curb to kitchen if you're hosting a Super Bowl party and you want to give, a great way to incorporate the family. Obviously, your wife would love this. For any of you guys that don't like the frou-frou stuff, you're just into the meat and potatoes, but she gives wonderful tips there on how to really run a sensational Super Bowl party. And from everything from projections on audio visual to what you can do for decor, media space, entryways, driveways. So I put that up there, just some tricks of the trade. And she's a wonderful person, and we thank her for that. So we've just tried to, all in all, Pod and James, we tried to give you some great ideas from Next Fan Up on what to cook and how to really celebrate the day. Because I will finish with this, guys. I don't know about you. I'm really thankful right now. When we sat back talking in August, I mean, how many of you thought we were going to get to a Super Bowl? Really? I mean, the pundits, the top people on Twitter, my conversation with the former president of Super Bowl and the vice president of the NFL, he said 50-50 at best. And he thought at least we'd be looking at a 70% chance it'd have to be moved 2 weeks. So I'm very thankful we've got this week, and I'm very worried that how I'm going to feel the day after Super Bowl, which should be a national holiday. I'm worried how I'm going to feel without football. I know I can pivot to college basketball, being a basketball coach, and I love the Final Four. I think it's the best 2-week sporting event in the world. And so I'm thinking that I'm very thankful to have another game, and we've got a great one here. And I really want to thank Pod for the opportunity to contribute to the Next Fan Up content, and I love being with you guys every week. So let's finish off in a grand way.
Love having you. And you bring up an excellent point there at the end. Not to give Neil any credit.
Oh, gosh.
Especially today.
Then don't. Neil stop right there. Let's go.
Well, all right, fine. Neil, you get no credit for this. But Neil was actually one of the ones that brought up the fact that, did we ever think the NFL season was going to occur the way it is? Now, we can look back, especially with 2020 hindsight, and say they did some things wrong. They should have scheduled things a little bit differently. to help alleviate the impact COVID had on the season. But we did get here. I mean, hell or high water, the NFL made sure they got here.
But understand this is the first NFL season in which we've had a football game on every single day of the week. At some point during the year, we've had Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. The fact that the Super Bowl is being played on time is, in short, no small miracle as far as I'm concerned, because you look at how the schedule was jumbled around basically starting in week 3 going forward with the testing process and how they had to refine it and refine it and refine it and refine it. And you know, emphasis on the fine part of refinement, because the number of fines teams and coaches got this season for just not following protocol, just insane, doesn't even begin to cover it. But we got the game as scheduled on the day it's supposed to happen with zero delay. So we got here. I'm happy for that.
And so we bring in our chief superfan, Nick, the one known as his smugness, to the podcast. Hello, Nick.
How is it going, gentlemen?
You're allowed to be smug when your team is in back-to-back Super Bowls.
Kidding.
Yeah,
Right?
I don't even remember what it was like not being in the Super Bowl.
Oh, stop it. It's only been 2 years. When it's been 20, then you can come back to me. Okay?
Oh, gosh. Please don't get him started, Nick.
We've already set the stage here to sort of lay it out here for you, Nick. I mean, this is the game. This is what you lift all those heavy weights for. This is the whole shebang. You're going to be crowned world champions. You did it last year. You're back here again. So what are the keys for the Kansas City Chiefs to win Super Bowl 55?
I think basically this is probably all going to come down to how well the Chiefs' banged up O-line is going to hold up and how well the Chiefs scheme their way out of that problem, because there's no personnel solution to it. I mean, they do some crackback blocks. They do some various little things like that and use motion to freeze, D linemen and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of standard things they do that help out the O-line, but they are one man further down from the AFC Championship game with Eric Fisher out. And this D line of the Bucs is far more formidable than what they face with Buffalo. So, but that said, I mean, Buffalo still has some pass rushers. They have some ability to do some of those things. And the Chiefs basically, and Buffalo, did what I think is becoming, sort of the standard approach to containing the Chiefs offense, which is go, two deep safeties, take away everything deep and only rush 4 all game. And the Chiefs were just content. They threw a ton of short passes in that game. And honestly, kind of what happened with that was you look at the biggest plays of that game by the Chiefs. It was like a 50-yard end around by McCole Hardman and what was like basically an 8-yard slant to Tyreek that he took for another 62 yards or something like that. Just cut through the whole rest of the defense. So, the Chiefs can still make big plays without throwing it to deep spots. And so I think most of that playbook and that approach is still going to work, even with, even worse blocking situation in terms of getting the ball out fast. Question is how the Bucs react to that. I think, it's interesting, whenever you have these matchups, I think it's actually like, when two teams play each other in the Super Bowl that have played each other in the regular season, it's a pretty close record, but the team that actually won in the regular season loses in the Super Bowl more often than not. And part of that's because, the other team has a chance to adjust and things like that. It'll just be interesting to see what the Bucs actually decide to do, because I've seen some analytics people saying that it's like, well, obviously what the Bills didn't work. And so what you want to do is actually force the Chiefs out of the high percentage short passes into the lower percentage big plays and just force them to continue to execute the big stuff, but that is exactly what the Bucs did early in their regular season matchup. And Tyreek Hill had like 220 yards in the first quarter. I mean, if you want to just say like, yep, we'll force Tyreek Hill to beat us. Okay, they can try that. But that is, I think, what this is all going to come down to is how each team plans around that one weakness, because it's basically the only weakness that either side has to exploit or to try to defend.
I mean, it's simple to say that there's a lot to take away from that Week 12 matchup to now. I mean, the Week 12 matchup was November 29th. That's obviously a different game than a Week 1 or a Week 2 matchup. However, there's a lot that's changed since even November 29th. And obviously, these two teams, you would hope, aren't going to do the exact same thing that they did in Week 12, because that would just be idiotic. But that being said, how much of what happened in Week 12 do you believe will dictate this matchup?
I think it all matters because, both of these teams have seen, they've seen what the other one can do to them. And really, despite the fact, I mean, you could make kind of two arguments about how that game went, and that, on one hand, it was, it ended up being a 1-score game. And so it's like, hey, this was close, but it was also, I think it was like 27-10 in the fourth quarter. And so, you could, I guess depending upon which camp you sit in, those 14 points were either garbage time or that was a near comeback. But I think we're nonetheless going to see probably some dynamics this in terms of the way that the scores play out in this game, because as we all know, I mean, the Chiefs can go on these just crazy runs. And if the Bucks can't respond when they get the ball back during those times, it's just so hard to make up, a 3 touchdown deficit, especially when the defense plays its best when you are in that mode. When you're in shootout mode, you're going to have to be passing it a lot. That is where the Chiefs are perfectly fine, believing in their secondary players, blitzing you a ton, and all that kind of stuff. And so, for the Bucks, I don't think the Bucks can win the game if they let happen what happened in the first matchup in terms of coming down to those, that big deficit, because the Chiefs are just designed to put teams away in that situation. And maybe they'll let you put some more points on the board slowly, but they're going to make it difficult for you to actually hang with them from any point thereon. And so I think that for the Bucks, the pressure is just going to be on to keep scoring early, because, I think they know that, and, it's Tom Brady. So, he's going to have that awareness of like every single possession, is potentially for the whole thing, because because that not getting a score on that possession might be the thing that makes it unsurmountable.
Hey, Nick, can I chime in there just for a sec? I think that your last point was probably the most significant, because Super Bowl's a different kettle of fish, right? There's never any indication of ever taking your foot off a throat. Then get out early, just keep pounding. There's no more trying to kill the clock, because both the mitigating thing there is both quarterbacks. Tom Brady's been a great second half quarterback. Mahomes, we know, can put up 4 1/4. Again, you never take your foot off the throat. And the first quarter could indicate a lot of things about what's going to happen. I agree.
And Andy Reid's been caught doing that several times, including in a Super Bowl with another team, of weirdly just getting to a point where it's like, okay, we're just going to slow play this from here on out, and letting teams back into games, and obviously not, managing the situation well with the Eagles in the Super Bowl against Tom Brady. I think he's learned a lot since then. I think
too soon, Nick.
I figured that might be causing some ouchies there, but no. Despite, it's fun to make the jokes, but Andy Reid has gotten a lot better with time management since then. But, like I said, he does still have these stretches where, he kind of, puts away the hot stuff in the playbook and just sort of like, let's a whole quarter coast by. And, absolutely, you can't do that in this.
I think it'll draw back to the first quarter is how many, the red zone defense on both sides. Who's entering the red zone and who can finish it off with a touchdown. If Butker and Suckup end up kicking a lot of field goals, it's wasted opportunities, because every point, every touchdown in the first quarter is really going to matter in the fourth quarter. And so the red zone defense are going to be critical on both sides.
I've got a lot of matchup questions for you, Nick, and they're all stat-based. And I'm going to start with this, which is not in my notes, because this newsletter just got sent to me literally 1 minute before we started recording the show. And it's from my good buddy, Mark Simon, formerly of ESPN, now at Baseball Info Solutions. But he's writing about the Super Bowl. Go figure. He writes about a couple of players that we should be keeping our eyes on in this game. And to start on the Buccaneer side, it's cornerback Carlton Davis. Davis got burned for 10 completions on 12 targets for 215 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Chiefs' win back in week 12. That included touchdown passes of 75, 44, and 20 to Tyreek Hill. Davis also allowed 2 touchdowns and 87 yards on 5 completions on 7 targets by Aaron Rodgers in the championship game. So how in the world is Bruce Arians going to trust Carlton Davis in Sunday's matchup? The thing to point out here is that Carlton Davis, for the first 8 games of this season, actually led all cornerbacks in pass defensive points saved, and had all 4 of his interceptions of the season during that time, and missed the last 2 games of the season with a groin injury. I'm not saying that means there's an excuse built in there for him, but perhaps there's been a lot of this. Well, I've got a stat that tells me this, but I got a stat that tells me this, and they don't mesh. They don't go with each other. To that degree, though, is Carlton Davis the cornerback that you're picking on in this game?
I mean, and again, it's almost, I think it kind of goes back more to the scheme than anything else, just because, again, I think maybe where that shift happened for the Bucs was actually that he was getting more safety help earlier in the season, and then suddenly he got put on an island more because he was playing so well. Because in against the Chiefs, they had him one-on-one with Tyreek for basically the whole first half without getting safety help a lot of the time. And just like in man, one-on-one Carlton Davis and Tyreek Hill. I don't know that there's any cornerback in this game you want to give one-on-one with Tyreek Hill without safety help. I mean, that's just it. I mean, and so the question is, how much help do they give him? And is that help then coming at the expense of a safety coming down on Travis Kelce's routes and stuff like that? And so, I think Carlton Davis, can be put in a position where he'll be okay. It is possible to take away Tyreek a little bit, at least his deep stuff, if you just basically throw bodies at the problem. But, it's basically going to be up to the Bucs, I think, coaching staff to see if they hang Carlton Davis out to dry again.
Well, Sean Murphy-Bunting has become the 4th player with an interception in each of his first 3 career postseason games. He joins Hall of Famers Aeneas Williams and Ed Reed, as well as Jason Sehorn, not a Hall of Famer. Although I'll bet Doc has some good stories about Jason Sehorn. No?
Other than being white?
Well, wasn't necessarily where I was going with that, but no. The other player that Mark Simon brought up in this newsletter to watch was Tyrann Mathieu. And I was watching Good Morning Football, and they were talking to Ed Reed, and they were specifically asking him about that time when Tom Brady sees Ed Reed in the locker room area and goes, "Oh, they had to bring you here because you're my kryptonite." And they asked Ed Reed how Tyrann Mathieu can be that kryptonite for Tom Brady. And I do believe the way that Ed Reed played is going to be a little bit of the way that they're going to try and use Tyrann Mathieu against Tom Brady. I think that's a pretty good game plan.
Maybe, but we'll see. I mean, Ed Reed was always much more of a deep guy, and he, playing center field, baiting quarterbacks into throws they shouldn't make because they think he's going somewhere else, or he'd make it look like he was, playing an entirely different defense, but he can see what the play is going to end up as the whole way and just reads it and jumps in front of the ball. Tyrann can do that, but Honey Badger, they like to keep closer to the line and just closer around the ball at all times. And, so, I mean, whatever they end up doing, it's going to, I think it's like a guarantee they're going to blitz Honey Badger at least twice in this game. And they're going to be kind of doing a little bit of everything with him, but it's definitely not going to be, kind of all one safety role. And, one of the interesting things, and, it's become a little bit of a staple with the Chiefs, but it was always something that Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, did in his successful win over Brady in the Super Bowl with the Giants in 2007, was that basically, so I can't remember, I think it was maybe Orlovsky who broke down the tape of it, but essentially whatever defense the Chiefs showed, or rather the Giants showed pre-snap, was like every single time there was not a single time where that look was actually what the defense was. They always shifted post-snap into something else, and they never once showed the same look twice in a row. And so that's what Spagnuolo is going to do. It's like it's going to be different on every single play and every single play, and it's going to look like something different, pre and post snap every single time. Now, granted, that was 13, 14 years ago of Tom Brady's learned a few new tricks since then. It's really hard to confuse Tom Brady. I'm not sure it's entirely possible, at least not for, long stretches, but that Spagnuolo is going to dial up exactly the same kind of stuff in terms of just there's never going to be any consistency to it. It's going to be
Pod, you would know. And Nick, that I'm going to say this is still a little bit, and this is what I dealt with the Saints. It's still a little bit of Brady's kryptonite. That's Brady's kryptonite. If you can come off coverage, if you can change it up blindly, this and that, it does keep him off kilter a bit. And that's the one thing I think I know for sure. So other than that, who knows what could happen with him? Because I think a lot of you talk about Honey Badger close to the line. I know Pod doesn't agree with me, but I think Tom's found his new whoopee, at running back. And he's going to be able to throw short and mitigate that. I know I use the word mitigating. There's just, these teams are so even with schematics that there's so many mitigating factors. But I think it still is kryptonite anyways. Yeah.
Well, speaking of whoopies, going back to that Week 12 game, I think he'll go back to his old whoopee, and that was Gronkowski, who had his best game of the season in that Week 12 game against the Chiefs. And all of that sort of ties into this other wonderful stat that I found from Sharp Football Analysis. Go download Warren Sharp's football stats. It's something like 55 pages worth. I've got a couple of highlights here for you in this particular podcast, and this one in particular, that the Chiefs have been great at covering wide receivers aligning out wide. However, slot wide receivers, it's a completely different story. For the second half of the year, the slot had a 55% success rate, 8.3 yards per average, and a plus 0.18 EPA, whatever the heck that is. The wideouts on the wide side, 45% success, 7.2 yards per average, and a minus 0.12 EPA. So I do think, we talked about sort of disguising the coverage, getting as much pressure as you can up the middle with 4 rather than blitzing Tom Brady is going to be the key. And honestly, that's really the key against any quarterback, maybe even Patrick Mahomes. But you got to cover that slot guy, and that's going to be where Tom Brady's going to see most of his success in this game.
2 words, Cameron Brate, not Gronk.
Maybe. I don't know. But really, I think this could be a key for both tight ends in this game here, Nick, because you got Travis Kelce, who still only ranks second amongst tight ends in postseason in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns to Rob Gronkowski.
That's going to change.
And with quite a few fewer games, I remember the stats are not that far apart, which is
that particular note is irrelevant. He's still second.
But I think you're right, and I haven't kind of analyzed it enough. I'd be interested to see sort of like when some of those kind of slot yardage comes in, because what the Chiefs tend to do is, there comes a certain point of the game that if they're up multiple scores, they're kind of giving you stuff underneath. But at the same time, the Chiefs do not have very athletic linebackers, or at least not fast ones. And they, again, they're blitzing guys all the time. So there's constantly leaving holes in kind of the middle of the defense that can be backfilled, right thrown over the top of the blitz. So I think, that's definitely, there's going to be stuff there. But it's just a question of what else they do. I think they're definitely going to blitz. It's just for what Spags does. I think you had Matt Verderam on last week who talked about the Chiefs play cover 0 more than anybody else in the league, and they're comfortable with their back end guys one-on-one with receivers, which is a lot scarier against this group than most. But they're still just going to do it. That's just part of who they are. And it's just a question of if Brady counts the hats and sees where the pressure's coming from in time to get the ball off. And we are going to need to see a big Frank Clark game, I think, in order for this all to work. Just because he was great in the postseason last year. He was kind of quiet in the regular season, but had a couple of sacks last week. But he's just going to be key. Putting his hand on the ball, actually getting some instant pressures. That is, I think, one of the huge matchups, and that's what's going to enable. If he is quiet again, then yeah, I think the Bucs are going to be able to throw over the top of the blitz on the Chiefs a lot.
Well, Nick, I think this is probably where I disagree with you. Yeah, Frank Clark's going to have an impact, but I don't think he's the key on that defensive line. I think it's more so Chris Jones and his pressure up the middle and drawing attention. If he can draw the double, maybe even the triple team, that should help Clark in one-on-one pass coverage, as opposed to the other way around. Because my thing is, they both help each other out, but I think it's more important for Chris Jones to make his presence felt early so that Clark can make his presence felt often.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the thing is with Jones, I mean, he's just always good, but I think his real value tends to be that he has that. There's only a handful of guys in this league at defensive interior players that can destroy a play just instantly. I mean, he moves so fast, it looks like the blockers don't even touch him, and the play is just dead to rights. And he can, on good games, he'll pull that out 3 or 4 times a game. And it's going to be when those particular snaps show up. If those show up in a key moment of the game, that those are drive killers. Those are what win you games from a defensive standpoint. And so, I mean, I don't disagree with you, but Clark is also really huge in the running game. I mean, it's something we don't talk about with edge rushers a lot, is the guys that actually hold their edge in the run game for all the off tackle stuff, which Fournette likes to bounce those outside. So, but I mean, clearly, I mean, we've kind of talked about all the guys on defense, like all the guys that are getting paid, Jones, Frank, and the Honey Badger all need to have their A game completely on in this one.
Frank Clark, just to highlight how important he's been to the Chiefs defense, registered 2 sacks against Buffalo, became the 14th player since 1982, when the individual sack became an official statistic, to record at least 10 career postseason sacks. He's recorded a sack in 4 of his 5 postseason games with Kansas City, including one in Super Bowl LIV. That'd be 54, in case you weren't paying attention to the numbers and the Roman numerals. Neil, who's not on this show. Can you believe that, Nick? It's the Super Bowl show. Neil's not here.
Hey, I mean, those fish aren't going to catch themselves.
I guess not. One other name I have on my notes here for you to talk about would be rookie cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, who registered a sack in each of Kansas City's 2 postseason games this year and is the first rookie defensive back with 2 postseason sacks since 1982. I don't necessarily know if Sneed is going to be necessary for sacking in this game, but he's definitely been, a gem for you in your defense.
Yeah, I mean, Sneed has been such an unexpected gem, and I think obviously Veach has done a great job of adding talent to this team. But in some ways, I think like Sneed is almost like exemplary of like what could be like go down as one of his best picks, just because his last year in college at Louisiana Tech, which obviously not a huge organization anyway, played safety, and he played just okay, but he played well as an outside corner the year before. So I think so many teams just sort of looked at the safety tape and were like, okay, whatever. The Chiefs grab him in the 4th, and he's played. I think he's PFF's top defensive back for the year, and he has crazy stats. I mean, I think he has 4 or 5 interceptions, several sacks, and he missed half the year. He broke his hand and then his collarbone in the year, and so he's been insanely productive in a short number of games. And yeah, I mean, he's absolutely become sort of a weapon and an all-around playmaker on the defense that they use to do literally everything, and so it'll be interesting to see who they match up with him, because there's every single guy on the wide receiver depth chart of the Bucs is a weapon, and they're all good. And so but I think probably of the Chiefs corners, they're all guys who just deal well one-on-one with guys overall. but Snead is probably the only one that's got the real playmaker in him, at least among the corners.
Any of these guys that we've mentioned, your X factor, the one guy we haven't mentioned as an X factor is the barber who tested positive for COVID. He's clearly the biggest X factor for the Buccaneers.
Isn't that a great conspiracy story?
It's a wonderful one. It's right up there with pizza given to Michael Jordan. Yep.
Yeah,
that was maybe the most terrifying tweet I've seen in my entire life when Schefter broke that story.
Oh my God.
Thankfully, the two players that actually did get their hair cut have both had, I think, at least 2 negative tests since then, and it was just a backup center and D-Rob, I guess the third or fourth wide receiver. So wouldn't be huge losses in and of themselves, but you never know. As long as they're not spreading it in the organization, hopefully we'll be fine there.
No, at least I caught him when he was giving the second one the haircut. I think it was Kilgore, the backup center. He was cutting at the time when the results came in, so they immediately pulled him mid-cut. These two have been isolated from the rest of the team. I think they said, another 13, 14 players, including Patrick Mahomes, were supposed to get their hair cut by this guy. So, great save in them catching it, containing it. Like you said, they haven't tested positive in their recent tests since. They are expected to be cleared by Saturday so they can play on Sunday. So you guys should be full bore as far as everyone who's healthy and available should be able to play on Sunday.
And this is probably the smuggest takeaway from this that I could bring out here, but it is, I know it's going to annoy Pod, and so I think it's worth making for that reason. I was talking to someone, I've seen somebody talking about how important this is for Patrick Mahomes' legacy, and that just seems like such a crazy thing to say, that this is a big legacy game for a 25-year-old player. But it really is, just because of it, if Mahomes continues on his continued trajectory, he's going to go down as one of the greatest ever, possibly be in the GOAT discussion. And being able to take one away from Brady and being able to beat Brady on the stage would be huge. But it's also, I think, going to be huge for Travis Kelce, who has I think finally got himself into rightfully in the conversation of the best ever at his position. I'm still a Tony G guy, but the fact that both of those maybe exhibit 2 and 3 are going to be both on the field in this game too is crazy. So man, this is going to be, we're not going to be, I think, short on takes for the off season after this one, no matter what happens.
Yeah. Do you think that, well, I don't know. It keeps coming back in my head, but I was at that Super Bowl outside the stadium where Spags and the front four did enough to upset Brady, who's on a path to greatness every time he touches the ball. There's so many great, he makes his own luck. That's how much, that's tenure. He's had he's been put himself personally in so many positions for greatness that luck just follows him wherever he goes. But that kryptonite that happened in that one Super Bowl, I'm just wondering if Spags has that kind of confidence in Chris Jones, Frank Clark and company. They don't need to send extra because the Bucs have got too many weapons. Do you feel you could see a little bit of the old Spags where you see the same kind of template that upset them in their previously undefeated season? Spags sounds like right now, listening to him on the media this week, that he just feels confident that he's got all the defensive horses he needs. Do you think he's going to basically coach the way he coached the Giants? Ironically, JPP on the other side now.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely nothing that Spags does is going to surprise me because that's just sort of his thing, is unpredictability no matter what. But I do think I guess the one thing that would kind of surprise me is if he went totally to a rush 4 only sort of game plan all game, just because he likes bringing the heat. And if there's any unit that I think that this team has shown that it trusts the most consistently, it is the back end. And so they would rather leave their back end one-on-one than their front four. And, because of the designs that they have that they like, and also just, both Jones and Frank Clark can be a little streaky. Neither one of those. I think I'm not sure the Chiefs have a Justin Tuck, although I'm not sure the Giants had a Chris Jones. But nonetheless, I'm not sure this is quite a front four that you can just drop everybody back and expect create constant chaos purely on their own. And so I do think he's gonna. That is the one thing that would just surprise me is if they don't blitz. I think he's gonna bring the heat. He might be more selective about it, but the heat is going to be coming.
Nick, the weather report says 71 degrees, the high, 61 degrees, the low, AM thunderstorms. I had seen an early report earlier this week that said there was actually going to be some rain, but it looks like it shouldn't be any rain here in Tampa Bay, at least not in the evening on Sunday. So weather, of course, not going to be a factor in this one. Who do you got? What's the score?
So I think we were talking about, I need to try to remember my prediction that I put into the Slack channel. One way or the other, I think it's Chiefs by 7. I'm going to say it's going to be a nice classic 38-31. And kind of along the lines of actually somewhat similar to the way that the game played out, just in terms of the tempo of, only maybe a little more back and forth in the first half. But the run is coming at some point. The Chiefs go on a run, and I think they put it just barely out of reach for the Tom Brady comeback, maybe with a big third down play by one of the guys we mentioned.
Last thing, what are you eating, Nick?
You know what? I was gonna, I like to make a whole bunch of sliders and just, it's great. Like it's good for the kid size. It's like, I'll mix in I'll make a few a little different, do one that's mix in some jerk. And get to do different cheeses and maybe some fried onions and stuff. So that was kind of my original plan. But man, the Andy Reid sandwich that you posted in Slack, that recipe looks so overwhelmingly tasty.
It's so easy, buddy. It's just so easy. I when I went down to work at a Steelers game with a girl from Survivor, I'll talk on another episode. My favorite beer pub, I'm big into craft beer, is called Fatheads, and they've got a sandwich called Mo Better Beef and Cheese. Well, Guy Fieri from Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives had Andy Reid on. As a matter of fact, they just reran the episode. When they do the hunch, he had that big pig sandwich from that pork place. So this is one of those fat sandwiches in honor of him. So I figured I'd reprise that. And I'll tell you, with bacon and mushrooms, you can't go wrong. And again, if you just get yourself a little sirloin tip roast, cook it to medium rare, slice it thin, and stack the sandwich out. You can do that on sliders. It really is tasty. Yep.
Before we close the segment, let me just give a few tidbits on what's currently available for the injury report. We expect all these people to play, but just some names that are popping up here. Sammy Watkins and Le'Veon Bell were limited on Wednesday. Watkins with a calf, Bell with a knee. We've already also talked about the two players with the Barber incident. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, linebackers Levante David and Jason Pierre-Paul. David was limited in practice with his hamstring. Pierre-Paul didn't practice due to his knee. Antonio Brown was limited in practice due to a knee injury. And the safeties, Antoine Winfield Jr. and Jordan Whitehead, were both limited in practice. Let's remember the Packers were able to take advantage of that Buccaneers defense once both of them were out, Winfield with the ankle and Whitehead with the shoulder. So we expect all these people to play, but limited or not practicing as of Wednesday.
Yeah, unless they've already been listed as out or they have some sort of debilitating injury. If they were at practice, they're playing in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's pretty much a guarantee.
Brick wall won't stop these players. Yes, I know. But it does bear mentioning because some of these players, some of these elements will not allow some of these players to play the entire game. Particularly, I do keep an eye on the players who come into the game with knee injuries and watch how much they play. Pierre-Paul was kept on a pitch count, if you don't recall, during the NFC Championship game. He didn't play every snap.
All right, Nick. Well, James and Doc and I still have a few more things that we can talk about. I know you got to run, but I have a feeling we're going to talk to you again in just a little bit because you have an offensive coordinator who's not a head coach, and we want to ask you about that. But hold that thought. All right, so Nick had to run. Before we give our final thoughts here I still have a few more things from some of our friends, especially Sharp, Warren Sharp stuff. Really, really, really top notch. But Warren Sharp mentions this Tampa Bay team is just the fourth team since expansion to field a top 5 ranked team in both offensive and defensive DVOA. Now, the previous 3 teams that did this went 0-3 in the Super Bowl. This is also just the third matchup between 2 top 5 ranked offenses, joining 2016 and 2018. The team with the higher defensive DVOA won both of those matchups. As a matter of fact, there was a lovely article at Sharp Football Analysis written by Rich Rybar, and I apologize, Rich, if I mispronounce your name. You and Matt Verderam can share stories about all of the matchups in regard to offensive and defensive DVOA since the NFL expanded to 32 teams in the 2002 season, and the results of such. 19 of the 36 Super Bowl teams since expansion have fielded a top 5 offense in DVOA. So that sort of goes against the whole idea that defense wins championships. Just 9 of the 36 teams have fielded an offense outside of the top 10 in offensive DVOA. Top 5 ranked offenses have a 2-5 record when facing a top 5 defense. And teams with a defense outside of the top 10 have a 4-5 record in the Super Bowl when not facing another defense outside of the top 10, which is interesting because in this particular matchup, the Chiefs are 2 in offensive DVOA, 22nd in defensive DVOA. The Buccaneers are 3rd in offensive DVOA, 5th in defensive DVOA. So some of the stats say Tampa Bay should win. Some of the other stats say the Chiefs should win. And I alluded to this before when we were talking with Nick. This has been the case with these two teams in this particular matchup for the last 2 weeks for me. Everything I've seen says one stat will say one team, one stat will say the other, and they don't go together. Doc, you're a DVOA guy. What are your thoughts?
Well, I keep overusing the word. I keep using the word mitigation, mitigating circumstances. Like this is such a, because my Saints team was top 5 DVOA and most of the year until they crapped the bed. It's just every time I come up with a competitive advantage, looking at stats or schematic, there's a mitigating factor. I mean, what are the biggest white elephants in the room right now? This Chiefs offensive line. Okay, we know that, and the ability of the Bucs to rush the passer. And I'm my biggest mitigating factor in the whole game is, so what? We got Houdini playing quarterback back there. When the Saints were in the backfield the entire day at the Superdome, in the backfield all day, they were winning pass rush after pass. They couldn't get to him. He's Houdini. When the Chiefs will torch the Bucs on run pass options and jet sweeps, mitigating what? The Bucs speedy linebackers. I don't know. Or they've got that, but they've got that. There's so many things in statistical and schematic that I kind of go back from my brain. I get smoke coming out my ears. I can't pick a winner. So I love stats up to a point where you just got to go on hunch here, really. And I think that we haven't had a quarterback matchup like this since 10 years ago with Breeze and Manning, both playing at the top of their games. So I find it probably the most exciting Super Bowl matchup ever. That's all I'll say. Stats aside, schematic aside, listen, I think that the Bucs are going to play cover 7. I think they're going to play man underneath. I think they're going to get physical off the line. I don't know that that's enough. I don't know that it's enough. I don't know that you can stop the Chiefs. So, but again, I use the term mitigation. Well, the mitigating factor is this. I mean, it's old hat. James, stats aside, schematically, are you having the same frustration? It's like
I am,
back and forth and back and forth,
You can make a case and an argument legitimately for either team. There's no concrete this is what's clearly in favor of one team or another. They've seen everything this season as far as systems and schemes on how to beat them and stifle them on both sides of the ball, what can expose their defense, what can take advantage of the offensive lines. Yes, we know, like you said, the biggest elephant in the room is the Chiefs tackle situation. They have a backup swing tackle and another backup tackle out there. So how they protect that offensive line on the edges from Shaq Barrett and JPP. Do the Chiefs get pressure up the gut to force Brady into some quick errant throws? Or can you actually bait Brady into some bad throws? Look, we saw in the NFC Championship game, two of his 3 interceptions were horrible throws. One was a tip ball, but 2 of them were just very bad throws, questioning where he was going with the football. But Brady's, I'm not going to say he's immortal, but he's playing more human now than he has in previous seasons. He is fallible. He can make mistakes, and sometimes that happens without pressure. So maybe his reaction time is slower. Yeah, he's seen everything, but he doesn't have the body to react the way he could, say, 5 or 10 years ago.
By the way, I didn't include this link, but Sharp also had a great article on Brady's throwing motion and those sort of loopy drop in the bucket type passes. He's throwing a lot more of those at this point in his career than ever before. Not throwing a lot of those line on a laser rope type passes.
Yeah, he has to drop the ball in the bucket, especially for the receiving core he has. Look, you got Mike Evans. That's the best way to do it. And same thing with Gronk and Bray at tight end. They have the height advantage over whoever they're covering by at least 3 to 4 inches minimum. So yeah, loop it up there. Let the ball just fall right down in their hands. It's the perfect throw to big, tall receivers and tight ends. So I can't concretely call this game one way or the other. I know who I want to pick, but it doesn't make me feel good.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like I was writing some stuff down. I mean, we can only take so much from the original matchup, right? Like case in point, Bucks Saints this year. But we do. In the first meetings when Mahomes targeted the 2 superstars, 21 of 23 for 351 yards. Tampa Bay was in man 17% of pass plays only. Mahomes 6 for 9 for 113. Tampa Bay this week is expected to be in heavy cover 7 man underneath to bracket, to limit the big plays. The first meeting, Bowles had 2 deep on 31 of 53 pass attempts. Mahomes crushes single high. We know that. He's not nearly as good as cover 2 for most of the season, but last week torched Buffalo on cover 2 of 11 of 13 for 104 yards. 6 and 1/2 dozen of the other. I don't know. Beef, pork, or chicken. I don't know. I was like, God almighty. It's like some trend from the stats moved all the way to one side and then was all mitigated by something different in the playoffs. Here
you go. The Chiefs have allowed 24 or fewer points in 4 consecutive postseason games. The Buccaneers have scored at least 30 points in each of their first 3 games this postseason and can become the first team in NFL history to score 30 points in 4 consecutive playoff games within a single postseason. It's like, again, one stat doesn't equal the other. It's going to be, guys, I've said this all along. One, there is a hands down, you're going to win bet, and that is the over. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about the over this week.
I don't know.
Because a lot of people seem to think that the over is an easy bet, and there's a lot of people on it. It's currently set at 56. Okay? 56 is
the first meeting was 51, so I think that's pushing it, but
I am telling you right now, I have seen what we will see on Sunday. I have seen this game before. I, as a Patriots fan, have seen this game before, and it is called Super Bowl XXXVIII. Again, that is Super Bowl 38. That is New England Patriots versus Carolina Panthers. Final score, New England 32, Panthers 29. Both teams were scoreless in the first quarter.
Yep.
Then it was 14-10 at half, New England. Both teams were scoreless again in the third quarter, and then explosion. 18 points by New England in the fourth, 19 by the Panthers, and ultimately you can see the final score 32-29.
Of course, the famous kick out of bounds. There's Brady's luck following him, and he deserved it.
Oh, my gosh.
I think the only difference between that game and the game we're going to see on Sunday is the third quarter won't be scoreless. I think both teams will be scoreless in the first quarter, and then they'll get their feet underneath them in the second quarter, and the second half is going to be back to back to back to back to back to back to back scoring. It's going to be a slugfest. The team that has the ball at the end of the game is going to be the team that wins. I know that's almost cliche to say, but that's exactly how this game is going to play out. It's going to be close all the way through to the fourth quarter, and the team that scores last is going to win this game because they're going to have the ball last, and they're going to score, and that's going to finish the game. And I don't know what team that is. I can't tell you what team that is, but I can also tell you this. This was the stat that is driving me towards the way that I am going to pick in this particular game. The Buccaneers defense has recorded 7 takeaways and 5 sacks this postseason. Both are the most amongst playoff teams. They had 5 interceptions and 2 fumble recoveries this postseason. Yahoo Sports tells me from November 1st to the divisional round, the Chiefs didn't win a game by more than 6 points and didn't cover the spread once, even though they won all but one game straight up in that time. They did cover versus the Bills in the AFC title game. They are favored by 3.5. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, give me Monty.
Give me a little Adam and Eve on a raft, wreck 'em, a cup of muck, and an upset special.
I am taking the Buccaneers, and I feel more confident that it's the Chiefs won't cover than the Bucs will win. But I'm taking the Buccaneers, and I'm taking the over. And I think we're going to have a fun time on Sunday watching offense because there isn't going to be a lot of defense seen on Sunday.
Can we bracket a couple minutes here to get off the football analytics and talk about how about funky betting stuff? Best 3 combos if you're in a square pool. 7-0 or 7-0, 0-0, and 7-7. Gatorade color: orange plus 140, red plus 300, yellow, green, lime plus 500, clear or white plus 650, and blue and or purple plus 800. Thoughts?
Well, if you listen to the Prop Bet show, they already talked about it. Both these two teams wear red. So right. the red is definitely a high probability of being dumped on their coach.
159 over under on the national anthem. Last 3 went under. Your picks.
It's a duet. I would take the over. You got 2 voices you got to highlight there.
That's good, rational. James?
By the way, I also think it's interesting that it is a duet. I don't know if this is the first time it's been a duet.
Who's doing the national anthem? Who is it?
It is Jasmine. My wife just asked me this morning, so you'd think I would know this off the top of my head. Eric Church is one of them, and Jasmine Sullivan. Yeah. I've never heard of Jasmine. Eric Church, I know, is a country singer. I assume Jasmine is an R&B singer. Oh, she's R&B?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Interesting. All right. Very last one, total on Gronk catches. Some good money to be made here.
What's the over-under on that?
Well, I'll just go here. 0 plus 700, 1 plus 350, 2 plus 240, 3 plus 325, 4 plus
nail the number. Avoid.
Yeah,
right.
I think
I got
he's
to
good.
The exact number. I'm staying away from that. If you give me a number and say over/under, I'm more equipped.
All right, I'll say over under 3. I'll say that.
Over.
Really?
Over.
You don't think
the line is 3, it's definitely over.
Tyler Bray can somewhat torch the middle of that defense potentially.
So here's the thing. that the only way it's under, and it's not like the Buccaneers haven't done this throughout the course of the season, is if they decide to go heavy run game and keep Gronk in to block.
That's what he's been doing. Yeah.
Right. So they'd be using him as a 6th offensive lineman to help out with whatever tackle they feel needs help on the edge, which, possible could happen here on key possessions where he lines up wherever Frank Clark is, just to help, double team him or maybe even take him on a one-on-one. But I don't know if they go heavy run game here after the first quarters. Arians' philosophy is no risk it, no biscuit. So
yeah,
he's had a couple of games where he's kind of let the run game run wild in the first quarter, and all of a sudden it's bombs away, and the pass to run ratio is like 5-1 for the rest of the game. And Brady's arm needs to be iced for like a week. So I think, again, that's a good first quarter strategy, but you're talking about over the course of the entire game, keeping Gronk in to block, I don't see it.
I mean, you mentioned it before when we were talking to Nick, Doc. This is the Super Bowl. This is all hands on deck, holding nothing back. We're unleashing everything. Anything that we've done this season, it's coming out in this particular game. And I could be swayed, because you mentioned Cameron Brate. I could be swayed that maybe the tight end targets more go towards Brate, and they do use Gronk as that sort of 6th offensive lineman. Maybe they have a bunch of 2 tight end sets.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'll go back to that Week 12 game, and that was where Gronk, that was his best game of the year. 8 catches, 97 yards. I think that's about right. I think we could see that, even if they're doing 2 tight ends and they're using Cameron Brate and they're targeting Brate as well. I think Gronk can get to that 8 catches just right at about 100 yards. I think that's his. I think that's
I'll give you the yin and yang factor for that. If Chris Jones and Frank Clark can get pressure up the middle, Brady's going to start throwing to one of his whoobies, and that's familiarity, maybe with Gronk more than any other player. When he's pressured and they snip 0.3 or 0.5 seconds off the throwing reads, that's when he goes comfortable. And I think his most comfortable target is Gronk. We just haven't seen it much this year, so it's not anything in normality's sake. And
I mentioned that stat about the slot. Let's not forget about Scotty Miller, who Brady is loved all season long.
Let's not forget my one of my Brate's 30-1 on the first touchdown, but my X factor, my friends, is a name we have not brought up. Tyler Johnson is a potential budding star, and Casey might forget him. If Antonio is healthy, there's too many weapons, and the KC Chiefs defense is going to run into the same problem with available bodies of capability to stay with the targets that Tom Brady has. It's the same problem we got with the Chiefs. Too much talent, too much speed. Pick your poison, right? So I think somebody like Tyler Johnson, whose stock is rising, could have one of those 6-7 catch games and be in talk for MVP.
All right, so Doc,
I'd like to see somebody other than a quarterback get it. There you go. Can you imagine? There's no, after last year's debacle with Mahomes winning MVP, there's no way. It's Brady or Mahomes for MVP. I think Brady or Mahomes could throw 3 picks and still get the MVP if they win.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It's just horrible. It's like the Heisman now. It's getting to be a joke.
Doc, who you got? Pick your team. Pick them. I'm putting you on the spot. You gotta make the pick.
Chiefs by 2, and my MVP long shot is Mikael Hardman.
Interesting.
Nice.
We got to go off the board. They're too even. We got to go off the board for everything.
James, you get to wrap it. You get the final word.
Well, my X factor for this game, my end all be all X factor for this game is the officiating crew.
Amen, brother. Amen, brother. I forgot we didn't talk about the zebras for the entire podcast. Thank you, sir.
And I say that both seriously and tongue in cheek because haha, referees. But no, seriously, the officials for this game, you got to know who's there. We got Carl Shevers is the lead referee. We know that this will be his second Super Bowl. Who is it? Sarah Thomas will be the first woman to officiate a Super Bowl. She will be the down judge. The rest of the crew will feature Fred Bryan as the umpire. Line judge is going to be Rusty Baines. Field judge is James Coleman. Side judge is Eugene Hall. Back judge, Dino Paganelli. And the replay official is going to be Mike Wimmer. So do your research on these guys. Figure out what they have a tendency to call a lot of during their games in the regular season.
And that doesn't, James, that doesn't matter because, again, this is one of the blemishes on the NFL. Why don't they take one whole crew, keep them together for normality, simplicity, and I don't understand. This is an all-star crew, and they get out of their comfort zone, and we know that they end up looking at each other to make calls.
Mm-hmm.
And who's going to make the first?
Doc, I'm going to take that one step further because that's exactly where I was going. All-star crew, not just in the Super Bowl. We get all-star crews in the playoffs too.
Yeah, I know.
They aren't the same regular season crew because they're all they work as a unit during the regular season for the most part. But when it comes to the playoffs and the Super Bowl, it's those guys who graded highly.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken,
are thrown together at their respective positions. So I would say if anybody's, trying to go heavy and deep dive into the outcome of this game, look at all these officials, see what they called a lot of during the regular season, what they have a tendency to call more often than not.
And here's another thing to add to the team, James. The field judge, the down judge, and the replay official, including the replay official, because they have effed up too. I don't understand. A lot of us savvy football fans are getting the calls before CBS and Fox in the booth, and then they're getting it before the replay officials. I don't have any trust, but in the replay, when you get the field judge, the down judge, and the replay official on their first Super Bowl in front of 8,000 trillion people, it's a different ball game, and there's no alchemy. There's no something between everybody. So Carl Shevers has got his work cut out for him. And I'm going to go back, and I know you're going to hate this pod, but I'm sorry. That's been proven scientifically. If this comes down to this is like Michael Jordan, the one GOAT, against Brady, the other GOAT. I'm giving the edge to Brady because he consistently has more flags thrown on his passes in key times than any quarterback in history. Now, he's earned that respect, but the fact is we know it's not straight black and white here, and you get three officials that have never done a Super Bowl. This is water and oil waiting to happen.
You might be right, because I'll bet the color dye on the referees' uniforms are definitely not 100% black. I bet they're like a dark slate.
But yeah, Doc brings up a good point.
Come on!
No, Doc brings up a great point. Nope. He brings up a great point. If the Buccaneers have the ball last down, whatever, and only need a touchdown, or
under the window in Vegas and make a bet.
Just don't be surprised if flags go in the Buccaneers' favor, whether it's defensive holding, pass interference, roughing the passer, hands to the face, like something that all of a sudden didn't matter through the first 59 minutes of the game, all of a sudden in the last minute matters. And this is not to pick on this crew specifically, but we saw it in the NFC Championship game. That officiating all-star crew ignored hand fighting, hands to the face.
Yep.
Every single piece of contact between wide receiver and defensive back or linebacker and tight end downfield. It was basically anything short of a mugging. And in some cases there was mugging, but hey, you didn't bring out any foreign objects and come off the top rope, and clobber the one guy. So it's okay. Let them play. But the moment the Buccaneers need that one first down to make sure the Packers don't get the ball back, now you want to throw your flag. And don't get me wrong. Yes, the flag should have been thrown, but consistency. I have a problem with the lack of consistency. And that's what I'm going to be looking for from the officials in this game.
Well, that's the problem with letting them play. That's the problem with letting them play. Otherwise,
and you can't.
That call is egregious at the end of the Green Bay game. But the fact is, it was the play was so egregious. It was like so black and white.
And that goes back to what I said earlier. You can't let them play for 59 minutes and then all of a sudden decide we're going to throw flags now.
Yeah. I would just like to remind you both that, especially you, Doc, that it does work the other way around, because sometimes the play can be so egregious the refs decide, I'm letting them play.
And so it's the fourth quarter. And it's the fourth quarter. I'm going to let it be decided on the field. Schoolology.
So Nicole Kobe, whatever his name was there, Nicole Kobe Roby Coleman. Yeah,
Roby Coleman.
It's going to knock out the wide receiver there.
Yeah. Side judge. I my hand was in the pocket, but what was he looking? He was looking at the end zone to the other official.
So it happens both ways. James is right. Consistency. All right, James. Now make your pick.
Can I pick the referees?
No, they don't win.
Damn it. Oh man. Like I said, I'm gonna make this pick and I don't feel good about it. I am gonna pick the Chiefs. I would take the under, and oh gosh, I don't see it being by more than a field goal.
There you go.
Pod, you're still an over guy, right?
I will say this: if either team goes up double digits at any point in the game, don't get comfortable.
Oh, no kidding.
But both of these teams are showing a propensity to come back from double-digit deficits.
You can just see it. Brady's up 28-13 at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and Mahomes is on the sideline. Come on, guys, we got him just where we want him.
And the Chiefs pretty much playoff history in these last two postseasons. They've made their careers of coming back from double-digit deficits. Heck, they were down 9-0 to the Bills in the AFC Championship game before they railed off like 30 points. So, yeah, I don't know if we're going to see the back and forth that you're predicting here, Pod.
Oh, we will, and it'll be glorious. That does it for our Super Bowl coverage. Let's talk about some of the things not happening regarding the Super Bowl. All the head coaching positions have been filled. There have been a bunch of articles. The biggest one that I've seen out there has been talking about Eric Bieniemy and Byron Leftwich, the two offensive coordinators in the Super Bowl, not getting head coaching positions. Bieniemy now has been passed up. What is this? 2 years? 3 years? I've lost count. I have lost count at this particular point. But Nick rejoins us to share his thoughts on Eric Bieniemy not leaving the Kansas City Chiefs. It's sort of a bittersweet, thank goodness he didn't leave feeling, I'm guessing.
A little bit, but honestly, the way Andy Reid approaches it is, he's constantly trying to get his guys jobs. And I think it's one of those things that sort of permeates through the organization as it being a positive. And I think it's, it's a bit of a point of pride for Chiefs fans to see that that our staff kind of populates the rest of the league. Most cycles, somehow it got stopped with Bieniemy. But I imagine you guys have discussed this a little bit too, but it's just crazy. There's not a single guy who has played under Bieniemy or or coached with him that hasn't said that it's nothing short of disgraceful that this somehow hasn't happened yet. And there was a really great piece on NFL.com by Jim Trotter looking into both him and Leftwich, and just it's really well researched, goes back decades, goes back into how the different cycles of like when this has been a problem and when finally lawsuits were being talked about, that's when they threw in the Rooney Rule. But then, maybe there's a little bit of progress and then it's been stagnation ever since. It's just crazy, especially with the very thin resumes of a series of white guys that have gotten jobs this cycle. Whereas you have, even if, you're looking at a team that had just like acute exceptional success on one side of the ball or something like that. look, I mean, the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl on the backs of their creative offense twice in a row, and this coordinator cannot get work. And he's also, and it would be one thing if he was 32 years old, and this, maybe he's been on staff for a couple of years, but he's put in a career of a lifetime of experience and work in the NFL, and he's taught every single different group in different ways, in one shape or form. And so it just doesn't make sense. And I think, in addition to the unfortunate, I think, race side of all of this and the comfortability, which is kind of mirrored on the decision makers and just sort of who they're maybe socially comfortable or whatever, because you got a lot of white owners and white GMs. But I think a lot of it is, maybe just some of the trends and the buzziness of these cycles where, because everyone likes the idea of having some like young wonderkind, that having a lot of experience in this league is almost a detriment to some of these candidates. And it's just weird. But I do think, I think it's going to be crazy if after next year he doesn't get a job. I mean, that is the point where maybe there is going to be some chatter about a lawsuit or something, because it doesn't make any kind of sense.
I know this is a topic that is going to set James off for sure, and I definitely want to talk to James about this particular topic in depth. The one thing I will say that has been talked about a lot, and we can say it's maybe even racially motivated at this point, was the fact that Bieniemy didn't interview well. And I mean, all disrespect to your team, James, but you're going to tell me that guy, I don't even know his name,
man,
that guy interviewed well? Because he certainly didn't do a good press conference.
Yeah. And when we started the postseason, podcast and talked about the coaching cycles and, the Texans were at one point the only team who hadn't interviewed Bieniemy, and this was before the Eagles fired their head coach. It was a what the hell is this type thing. Like, here we go again. And before I get to the debacle that is the Philadelphia Eagles, to touch on what Nick was saying, since Andy Reid's been head coach of the Chiefs, every one of his OCs has been hired for a head coaching job. Doug Peterson gets the Eagles job. Nagy gets the Bears job. These are the two predecessors to Bieniemy. You telling me now Bieniemy doesn't get hired now? At this point, he's only been OC.
Sorry, I'll let you continue. But and there was even talk of the Chiefs QB coach Mike Kafka,
right,
being interested. By the way, a young, inexperienced white guy in the position. And when I saw that, I was just like,
quarterback's coach.
There's no way
over the OC.
No way.
How the hell do we do that? How does the quarterback coach get a nod over your OC? Bieniemy's only been OC of the Chiefs for what now? 4 years, Nick? Is that correct?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't understand how you go below him to someone on his staff to hire before him. Like the egregious and atrocious don't even begin to explain my disdain and disgust with the hiring process. And Pod, since you brought it up, yeah, the debacle that was the Nick Sirianni's press conference with the Philadelphia Eagles, stammering and stuttering over a statement. I think the idea of having a statement is so that you have something to read from. And, he had it in front of him. It was written out, typed out, whatever it was. And he stammered and stuttered over every word. Now, the only good thing I'll say is thank goodness press conferences don't necessarily dictate team success. But, I can go to Adam Gase as a perfect correlation is how it's spelled twice. But, it doesn't give hope for what's going on in Philadelphia right now. And the fact that, I understand what Philly was doing. I still think it was the wrong choice because this guy didn't even come up on anybody's radar. No one was talking about the offensive coordinator with the Colts being a guy that teams were looking at or even considering for a head coaching position, but they wanted to go to the guy staff who made Carson Wentz look great in basically his one phenomenal year in the league. And, you go to Frank Reich's staff, who was the OC when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and you pluck somebody from there. Okay, so he learned from Frank Reich, but this guy's never been in the organization. He has no idea who Carson Wentz is. And Nick posted a couple of articles here in the offseason. A lot of the issues going on between Wentz and Peterson and Howie Roseman, seem to come down to Carson Wentz and whatever head games he's playing with both the organization and the previous head coach. A lot of this past season was on off doing, and you couple that with teams asking the Eagles about trade requests. Who wants him? Seriously, think of all the teams with quarterback vacancies or who could have a new quarterback, and tell me where Carson Wentz is going to perform well outside of the obvious Colts. Because the Eagles, I will say it, even if they do the dumb thing of trading Wentz, they will force another team to take on the bulk of that, guaranteed money so that they don't eat it. But as far as the coaching cycle, back to that topic, I don't know what could be done at this point, because Byron Leftwich, back-to-back seasons, OC of the Buccaneers under Bruce Arians, and that offense has done nothing but break records as far as that franchise is concerned. Say what you will about Jameis Winston last year in his 30-30, still threw for like 5,000 yards. He completed over 65% of his passes. That offense moved up and down the field at will, and now you throw in, Tom Brady, who's basically got one foot in the grave as far as his football career goes. And yeah, he cuts down on interceptions and still throws 30-plus touchdowns. So you talk about a guy who's basically done it on both ends of the spectrum as far as quarterback talent, questionable and arguably the best of all time. And he got zero consideration. I don't see how that works.
Yep. We're definitely going to get into this. We're definitely going to get into this in depth, but I know Nick has got to run. But definitely wanted to include Nick's opinions there on Eric Bieniemy. I've got some more thoughts on Bieniemy, and specifically which of these jobs was the best fit for Bieniemy. I'll get into that with James and Doc. But Nick, thanks for jumping in.
Sure thing. I'll just leave you with one final note of just on Bieniemy, of when you look at the players that get interviewed and they talk about it, they all say to the T that their favorite quality of him is the way that he's a leader, but the way that kind of relates to everybody. And I think that's something that's really missing from the conversation. And I think these teams' views of coaches, that the ability to have an interpersonal relationships and trust and confidence with every member of your team, or at least your side of the ball, guys that come from all sorts of different backgrounds and things like that, is huge in this league. And teams just keep on getting guys that just do not mesh well with players. Whereas Bieniemy, and it's not just that he's a nice guy that they all enjoy. The big thing that they always say is he will be tough and he will hold people accountable more than just about anybody. Yet they all come out loving him for it. So I think he is exactly what some of these fairly broken organizations need, but not going to happen this cycle. Always a pleasure talking to you guys.
Thanks, Nick.
See you, buddy.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, I teased it there, James. Here we go. Eric Bieniemy's best spot. All right, the Jacksonville Jaguars with the number 1 pick. They're going to take Trevor Lawrence. We talked about all along that probably a college-based or offensive coordinator with the sort of new college offensive mindset was probably going to be the best fit there. I've already said I don't think Urban Meyer is the best fit there, but I always thought that Joe Brady would have been the guy in Jacksonville for that particular job. Yep. I don't necessarily think Eric Bieniemy fit best there. The New York Jets, I think Bieniemy could have fit in there. The question is, does Bieniemy really want to go to a team like the New York Jets? And that's where coaches go to die. I would say probably not.
Well, the Jets issues is more than just we know the Jets issues mainly organizational, GM, personnel, people.
Right. And that kills you as a head coach. So
it does.
It ties your hands
bad when you don't have the talent.
Right. It ties your hands, and then you look bad for the rest of your career. And maybe you weren't a bad coach, but you were the New York Jets head coach. So now you're branded for life.
Todd Bowles.
The Atlanta Falcons, I think, could have been a great spot for that. This goes back to something that Nick said. Bieniemy, if we want to put it in these terms, which I don't necessarily agree with, but to use the narrative, Bieniemy benefits from having a wonderkind at quarterback, whereas Arthur Smith, who ultimately got the job, got damaged goods as his quarterback and showed that he could improve him. And I think that might be the thought process there with the Falcons, in sort of Matt Ryan. As we're going to get into the quarterback carousel, it's come out that Matt Ryan probably not going anywhere next season. He's going to stay in Atlanta.
That's what they say.
Quarterback there.
Who shows their hand?
Well,
right?
but you now have a head coach. Going back to the head coaching point. Let's not move off. Let's not go on the quarterback tangent yet. Let's stick with the head coaches here. They took a head coach. They hired a head coach who has a pedigree of improving damaged goods versus Bieniemy, who was given the benefit of a wonderkind as his quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, the Atlanta situation was also a double dip because they were looking forward to GM as well. So you got to look at, and I'm not trying to dovetail off the coaching part, but I think Bieniemy could have been a good choice for Atlanta. However, I don't think the personnel fits what he would have wanted to do as far as how he was going to run an offense there in Atlanta.
So there's another point in why Bieniemy's not a head coach, because maybe he didn't want to go there in the first place. The Chargers, I'm going to put a pin in the Chargers. All right. Just note there's a pin there. The Detroit Lions, that team's in a super rebuild. We saw that they've traded away their quarterback for another quarterback. Mm-hmm. I doubt that they had those type of conversations with Bieniemy, but ultimately, is the Lions an organization that Bieniemy wanted to go to? My guess is probably not.
Probably not.
All right. The Texans situation, it sounds like the quarterback that's there currently wanted him. But that organization is just become a joke ever since, and it's gone downhill. They're not improving anything from a front office standpoint. So again, is that a place that you ultimately want to go to? It almost sounds like a Jet situation.
So in a vacuum, I would say yes, he would want the Texans job to coach Deshaun Watson. But knowing what we know, the organization never even considered Bieniemy. He was never on their list to begin with. They only interviewed him at the behest of the quarterback.
All right. Well, and that's fair enough. And to the new general manager's credit, he was the one that first put him on the list. They didn't have a GM before they requested an interview with Bieniemy. Mm-hmm. The Eagles situation. Let's start here. We've talked on this podcast before, James, that we knew that the Eagles head coach was going to be a puppet for the general manager. That if he didn't get in line with the chain of command as the general manager wanted it set up, that he was not going to succeed, and that's why Doug Peterson's no longer there. So the fact that they got this bumbling, mumbling Nick Sirianni. Sorry, Nick, until you come out and show that you can actually talk to the press in a straightforward manner without bumbling over a written statement, then that's the way I'm going to refer to you. There's no way Eric Bieniemy wants to just go there to be a mouthpiece for the general manager.
No, and Bieniemy comes across as a no-nonsense guy who's sure of his talents, confidence in himself as far as what he knows to do to run an organization. Also, remember, you're talking about a former player in the NFL, so that's another reason to why his players with the Chiefs revere him so much. I think he would have fit in awesomely well in the Eagles locker room. But like you said, a puppet. Not only that, I believe the Eagles wanted to clean house of everybody on the coaching staff, which is why Deuce Staley was given a token interview and never really considered. They wanted him gone because the players there, to a T, offensively and defensively, love Deuce Staley and would have loved for him to be the next head coach. They didn't want any remnants of the current coaching regime or the previous regime left behind in any way, shape, or form, like you said. And coming out of all the media that I've seen talking about the Eagles' choice to hire Sirianni, this is Dallas 2.0. And it stems from the previous head coach before Doug Peterson, who I tried not to mention by name, in which he had a 10-win first season coming out of college in that system in Oregon.
Doc, do you know who that head coach is?
I'm thinking about it right now.
It's a nice snack.
Chip.
Yes.
There you go, Doc. So,
and the color green that they wear?
Yeah. Well, used to wear. We've been trying to get back to that green. The league won't let us. But that guy becomes head coach. He wins 10 games, convinces the owner to let him make personnel decisions, right? So Howie Roseman is literally relegated to the far side of the building, away from where all the decisions are made. He is GM in title only, but he makes no personnel decisions. And somewhere during that time frame of that 3-year span in which that guy was head coach before we got to Doug Peterson, Roseman developed a chip on his shoulder, deservedly so, but he also developed a complex, whether it be imposter syndrome or inferiority complex, something. And he chose to take it out on the next head coach, which happened to be Doug Peterson. And all Peterson wanted to do was to pick his staff and coach his players. You want to pick the players, fine, but he wanted to pick his staff. Now, success does not come without its consequences. And yeah, year 1, 7-9. Year 2, Super Bowl victory. The offensive staff is plucked. We lose the quarterback coach to Minnesota. We lose the offensive coordinator to the Colts. And trying to replace them, whether it be from outside or within, was Peterson's job. Well, come to find out that Roseman had a say-so in those decisions and has been having a say-so ever since. And dictating the staff of a coach's inner workings as far as how they're going to conduct their coaches and personnel is not how a GM conducts business. Your job as a GM, get the players the coach needs to succeed. Let the coach worry about his staff and coaching up those players. Once you start meddling with the coaching staff, you end up with the chaos the Eagles had this season. Because now you got a quarterback who's got too many voices in his ear and pretty much hell-bent, doesn't like it, butts heads with the coach, and decides that he's going to do things his own way despite the team. And we'll get into quarterbacks later. But, yeah,
So that brings us so again, let's come back to my pin. That brings us to the Chargers as really the only team out of the 7, as we look back with 2020 hindsight, as the best landing spot for Eric Bieniemy. Now, why would the Chargers not hire Bieniemy? It makes sense. Make your division rival weaker by taking away their offensive coordinator. You have technically a wonderkind at quarterback, which is why Eric Bieniemy, if you want to use that narrative, is successful in Kansas City. And to me, it just made perfect sense. The only thing that gives the Chargers any sort of pass is that Brandon Staley is the only defensive coach that was hired in this round of hiring. Everybody else is offensive-minded coach. Well, Robert Salah is defensive coach.
Can I go on the other side of the court for this one?
Go ahead.
And I'll just be the yin to the yang. All right. Even if I believe this, and I don't know that I do, but number one thing we forget is these hot commodities like Brandon Staley. He had a lot of look, he is the exact flip of what Bieniemy is. Bieniemy, number one, look at who he coaches and the absolute style of offense they run and the personnel that fits the scheme. Park that. For me, Staley had a lot of blue chip players, but we tend to discount and we tend to forget the impact that a great defensive coordinator as a head coach has on his quarterback. And I guarantee you that young upstart in San Diego is going to learn just as much or more about the game of football from a young, sharp mind like Brandon Staley, who's a defensive-minded coach, as he would from any young upstart like Bieniemy. Bieniemy runs an offense or co-directs an offense that has an immense amount of different talent that Los Angeles doesn't have. Now, that's my side of the court. Okay? I don't think right now, if you take a look at Number one, the other mitigating factor is the fact that not all coordinators are suitable to be head coach. It's a different game altogether when you're managing all facets of an organization versus coaching one side of the ball. There's the other mitigating factor, right? So for me, I think that Justin is going to learn as much from Brandon Staley as he would from any Eric Bieniemy. And what style of offense Bieniemy would theoretically have brought aboard or applied his successes from the Chiefs to the Chargers, how much is applicable to the style of quarterback that they currently have, who is a rising star? That's my side of the court. Thoughts?
I can relate that back, say, some almost 30 years ago when the Washington football team hired Dallas's offensive coordinator, Norv Turner, to be their head coach after Dallas won back-to-back Super Bowls to try to hurt them. In the long term, no, it didn't work out. They didn't have the personnel to do what Dallas did. And Norv Turner brought in that system that got Dallas back-to-back titles. He tried to implement it in Washington, and immediately it paid off for probably about a year and a half. But for the remaining 2.5 years of his career coaching in Washington, they just never really got the personnel they needed to mimic what worked in Dallas. They tried, and like I said, mixed results, but it never resulted in division championships or even playoff appearances. So, but did it hurt Dallas in the long run? Yeah, Dallas has been trying to, be a powerhouse in this league ever since. And you look at something that could have been a simple succession from Jimmy Johnson to Norv Turner, but the owner and the head coach butt heads, and then you bring in Barry Switzer. And after Switzer got, their third championship with that core group of players, he pretty much, flamed out because now your star players, the core of the group, are moving on elsewhere because they want more money for their success or they're getting to the end of their careers. So it's one of those things was like, yeah, in some aspects you can hurt your rival, and I get what Pod is saying. And the other side is, do you technically have the personnel to run what your rival was running?
And from that, so, James, don't you, Pod, think, I want to hear from both of you on this. Don't you think that this is one outstanding critical flaw in the hiring process? That other than Robert Saleh, that gave us a top 5 defense in an absolute year of decimation on injuries. He did that without a lot of stars, maybe Fred Warner, but he put together something special this year in a down year when it comes to injuries. That is reputable. That is crucial. And I think he deserves to be a head coach. But isn't this a critical flaw? Name me other coordinators in the NFL that have been taken to the next level as head coach because of number one, the success of their side of the ball with the team they were previously on. But name me somebody that did it without the appropriate talent. They always come from a team that had a top offense or defense, but had the blue chip players to fit that style or fit the scheme. Tell me somebody other than Saleh that was hired this year that didn't come from, for instance, the Atlanta coach, right? For me, if you ask me, Arthur Smith, his style, yes, it fits Matt and company in Atlanta, but the fact is he had a tight end. He had a wide receiver. He had a blue chip running back. He doesn't coach like Eric Bieniemy does. It fits. But without those stars in Tennessee, would he have achieved the same level of success for his style of coaching? I think it's a critical flaw in the NFL. And I want to go back and bring it. I applaud the Chargers for hiring a defensive coach because, again, we forget how much a smart defensive coordinator brings to the offensive party as much as, a master's degree in freaky offense.
Yeah, but still look at some of the defensive coordinators who are passed over, like Todd Bowles.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I agree.
Well, Bowles would be technically a retread, and I believe Bowles is a better coordinator than head coach. He's very soft spoken. He's not I don't necessarily know if he's a fire you up kind of head coach guy. He's got plenty of
like you said
experience.
earlier,
I think
Jets
Todd
are where
Bowles
coaches go to die, and Todd Bowles was a former Jets coach. So if teams are holding that against him, then that's a knock on them, not him.
That's fair. But I would still say I don't think Todd Bowles is the kind of guy that needs to be brought back for a second chance. And maybe that's because I'm too biased when it comes to the Jets and the stink of the Jets on him. I will say Brandon Staley is the guy that came out of nowhere. He's the one. He really is the question mark here, Doc. And I get it. If you shaved Sean McVay, Brandon Staley and McVay could be twins, right? I mean, they really could. He talks exactly like McVay. He's got the touch of McVay because he coached on his staff. He's literally coming from across the hall. So I'm sure the Chargers have a lot of knowledge of who Brandon Staley is because they share the same stadium, the same facilities essentially with him. But at the end of the day, man, I think the Chargers are the ones that made the mistake here by not hiring Bieniemy. Now, let's take this a step further. And this is where I know I have to tread lightly. But there were minority coaches that were hired this time around. Just because it wasn't Bieniemy and it wasn't Byron Leftwich, the two faces of that particular aspect of coaching, doesn't mean that the NFL failed this time around, which is what I'm hearing. And that's unfair to these coaches who did get jobs and the reasons why they got these jobs.
Well, let me interject with this part. These two were the two most high-profile coaches or coordinators available, right? And in what other coaching cycle do you see the big high-profile coordinators not get hired, especially when teams are looking for, someone to pair with a young quarterback or a quarterback they plan to draft when they're looking for that offensive genius or guru. And we can go back years before Leftwich and Bieniemy became coordinators. Like I said, Andy Reid's coordinators, everyone who's coached under Andy Reid who's become a head coach, almost everyone, has been offense. And they were high profile coming out of him, whether he coached in Philadelphia or now in Kansas City. Nagy was a hot name when he was hired. He was top of the list. Peterson was one of the big names floating around when he was hired. I'm trying to think of the staff in Philadelphia. Who did Detroit hire?
They hired Dan Campbell.
Not this time around, but Detroit hired Eagles coordinator way back when.
Yep. I don't know.
What's that? It was when Reid was coach of the Eagles, but he lost, OC after OC. John Gruden was on the offensive staff, before he got the Raiders job.
It's the Holmgren tree.
So I just find it puzzling that it works one way, but it doesn't work the other. And yes, the elephant in the room is race because these other guys just happen to be white and they're top candidates. But when the top candidates are black, they're looked over. And yes, two coaches of color, Robert Saleh and Cully, were hired, the Jets and the Texans respectively. But Robert Saleh was the only big name out there that was hired. No one's like how the Texans got their coach. No one was checking for this guy from the Ravens staff.
Nobody was.
And not a knock on him. I'm happy he got the job. I'm happy he's getting this opportunity. But he's a first-time head coach and he's 50.
Well, again, with hindsight being what it is, before the Deshaun Watson stuff was going down, Houston was a super attractive place for any potential head coach. Now that Deshaun Watson wants out of there, and we know why, and we know what the culture is in that front office and how it's being run by Jack Easterby, to to me, what head coach wants that? What guy wants that job? Because
he never expected anything like this to happen, nor did the entire industry.
Right.
He would be the last call for a head coach.
Again, we talked about it with Bieniemy. Now with Byron Leftwich, does Byron Leftwich want to go to a place where you're trading away a superstar quarterback and you're getting back, you have no idea in return, and you got to completely rebuild the offense, and the defense is starting to fall apart, and you're most likely going to be without, you can say what you want about JJ Watt. He is the heart and soul of that defensive team, and he's not going to be on that team next season.
Nope.
So to me, it's and everything that's come out about what's going on with that front office and the culture that's going on with the Houston Texans, what guy in their right mind, other than a guy, like you just said, never expected it, never thought of it, was given the opportunity and and said, you know what? I'll take it because I got nothing to lose. I'm 50 years old.
I think he would have regrets, Pod. He would have regrets if you listen to David Culley talk and you listen to the pundits like Peter King that he did a poll. Nobody expected it to even be offered to a guy like this. But he's thinking, you know what? Look at his age. He got 5 years left, maybe.
Right.
And if I don't give it a shot now,
he's the perfect guy for that position. Not Bieniemy, not Byron Leftwich. Two guys whom, if they don't make it in their first shot, understanding the history of the NFL, their second chance is going to be less likely because of all the things that we've talked about here.
Mm-hmm.
So again, to me, that leaves, with hindsight being what it is, 2020, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they needed someone who wasn't going to be, yes, Urban Meyer, this is his first go round, but Urban Meyer is a different creature.
He's a CEO.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's coming in as more than just the head coach. The Jets, they made a great hire in Robert Saleh. I mean, that came down to, were you going to be better? Were you going to be a guy that's going to fit better than the guy that they ended up choosing? The Atlanta Falcons and the Chargers are the two, and maybe the Lions, are really the only jobs here that fit for the two guys that we're talking about, and Bieniemy and Leftwich.
I don't even know that.
And the Lions technically went with a guy who has technically head coaching experience in Dan Campbell. Yeah. Yes, as an interim head coach, but it's still experience.
He also played tight end for Detroit.
He's got that going.
Robert Saleh's from Detroit. I thought Saleh would have.
The coordinator I was thinking about was Brad Childress.
Yep.
So I mean, nobody wants to go to be a puppet in Philadelphia, and
no,
unless you're Nick Sirianni, and you don't want to be involved in whatever's going on in Houston. So to me, it's the Falcons, Chargers, and maybe the Lions. And like we just said, Dan had friends in high places. The Chargers took a guy that they clearly were very comfortable with, and the Falcons went with a guy who has a resume of taking damaged goods and making them better.
There's no Mahomes. There's no Hill. There's half a Kelsey. And there's worries on the defensive side of the ball. I think the hire, or the more so the not hire, is justified in San Diego. But I believe if things weren't so chaotic and this collapsed circus tent in Houston, that's what it is. It's the whole circus tent is coming down. Whether he, it's all semantics. Well, I took this job thinking that Deshaun Watson was my quarterback. Well, for the time being, right? I mean, but if he was going to be there, I'd be bitching more and complaining more that the best offensive mind in the NFL right now that is beloved by players was not going to be in Houston. But there's mitigating circumstances, word of the day, for all this, for a lot of these guys. And I think he'll get his shot. To finish up. I don't know. I just think it's more egregious that Byron Leftwich doesn't even get a call, or the interim Atlanta coach doesn't get a call. Now that I got a problem with that as much as Bieniemy.
Yeah, Raheem Morris got 0 calls.
0 freaking calls.
Raheem Morris deserved a head coaching position.
Just
I said that all along.
Yeah.
I didn't think obviously Atlanta wants to make a change at that position, so he's not necessarily the fit for the Atlanta Falcons, but he was definitely a fit somewhere else. And so his name, along with Bieniemy's and Leftwich's, will be on the list for next season because we know that this can happen
Morris
again.
is now the defensive coordinator with the Rams, so he filled that void by.
Oh, well, and there you go. And now he's been touched by McVay. So he's got all things going for him now.
Oh.
Come on.
You know what, guys? I got to tell you something. Yeah. Of all my years following the NFL, and I'm 105, this is the most crazy, interesting offseason between coaching and quarterback carousel, free agency, and the draft the NFL has ever had. Ever.
I'm glad
and so it gives us banter and fodder off season, which is very therapeutic. I hate to bring that full circle.
Because even though we're at the 2-hour mark, you brought up the quarterbacks, and Matthew Stafford went for a ransom. Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
I believe it was me on this podcast just last week who said, we can sit here and we can say our quarterback's worth 2 first-round picks and this and that and the other, but they never go for that. And sure enough, Matthew Stafford ends up getting traded to the Rams in return for Jared Goff and 2 first-rounders, and I think there's some other picks involved in that particular trade as well.
Yeah.
I think they're swapping seconds and something else.
I mean, this is an outrageous deal. Now, a lot of people are sort of saying, well, the Lions are taking on the Goff contract the same way the Broncos took on the Brock Osweiler contract. I think Goff, first of all, is better than Brock Osweiler. I think Goff is actually a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Agreed.
So I think it's a little less than that. I'm sure a little bit of that is definitely involved, but at the same time, man, woo.
You know what it's like, Pod?
Big haul.
This was, for me, it was a big, I think Detroit won out on this one big time, especially with the contracts. But I'll tell you this. It's just a horrible comparison. This is like the neighborhood heads of state getting together, and they've all decided to wife swap. There's going to be a lot of wife swapping going on because it seemed like McVay was damn determined to get rid of Goff by midseason. You know, what we're hearing. It's like this is going to be a whole season of wife swapping.
Towards the end of the year when Goff pretty much injured his thumb, he was hell bent on Warford being his starter going forward. So
yeah. But
I think what neighborhoods you're growing up in, Doc, but I think it's a good thing.
No, it's just like I'm not even married, but it's like wife swapping. It's like, what's the difference between Goff and Stafford? One shaves his armpits, the other one doesn't. It's not that much of a difference. I don't think so. I call it wife swapping.
Well, there's an age difference. I mean, that would be the biggest difference in regards to the Lions, but
we know the Rams window is. I mean, Detroit's starting over, but again, rebuilding since 1952. But for me, I think you look at the contractual situation with the Rams. Their window's now. When that defense is under contract for the most part, their window's now. So did this give them an additional 8 to 10% possibility? Yeah, to get back to the Super Bowl. Yes, they made the decision. But for me, in the long run, I think Detroit won on this deal. I don't know how you guys feel, but I was shocked about the 2 number ones.
Well, the only other thing I'm going to point out is the Rams have definitely taken we're not going to build our team through the draft. We're building our team through free agency. And people need to stop saying that free agent teams can't win, because we saw the Rams in the Super Bowl not too long ago. Yes, they lost, but they were a super team. We're seeing the Bucs in the Super Bowl right now. They're a super team. They were
also they were a good team with a quarterback on his first contract.
But they've added a number of players to that team to make it a super team. And so this is not, you can build a team through free agency. You don't have to necessarily build it through the draft. That said, I still think the Mahomes method and the Watson method, getting a quarterback in, a superstar quarterback in on the rookie contract, and then building a team around that superstar rookie quarterback is the way to go.
Russell,
I still think that's the best way to build the team.
It's the most efficient, we can say, I think,
But it's pretty clear that Sean McVay doesn't want to have a rookie quarterback.
No, he hasn't had a first-round pick in 5 years or something.
He wants a quarterback who can make decisions on his own.
Maybe. Well, listen, and Goff didn't know which side of the country the sun came up. Wasn't that the question? That's his. He couldn't answer that.
No.
Where does the sun rise? He didn't know.
Well, however it plays out with this trade, Goff is still inevitably linked to that dumpster fire that was quarterback in Philadelphia this year. So
that's true. But now he's not going anywhere because you've got the puppet master in play, and so he's going to stay there. Supposedly not going anywhere, according to Rappaport, NFL Network, teams are calling the Philadelphia Eagles asking about Carson Wentz and what they would be willing to take, to acquire him. But they're not trying to. But like I said, if I'm the Eagles and you're entertaining calls, you're letting everybody know you're taking on this guaranteed money as well. Like we're not going to be saddled with dead cap money, which will probably involve doing something like what the Rams did, that if a team's going to take on this dead cap, you've got to give up multiple draft picks as well.
Yeah. I think a lot of these, I'll have to get the last thing I'll say on this podcast, guys. I think that we're going to see in the next 60 days a three-way. There's going to be a couple of three-way trades to make something happen for this wife swapping.
Well, and the biggest one rumored right now is the Washington football team with the Vegas Raiders and the Houston Texans, with Watson heading to Vegas, Carr heading to Washington, and a whole bunch of draft picks heading to Houston.
Yeah, and not often we see a three-team trade in the NFL.
No, I think it's suitable, James. I think that to make everybody, this guy wants to leave. I mean, who's holding the cards in Houston? It's 50-50, but literally in the end, it's Deshaun. He can sit out and take the fines all he wants. If he don't want to be there, that you're screwed. Okay, fine.
Then he goes
to make it happen. What's that?
Then he goes to play for the Rock in the XFL. Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah, no. I think even if he sits out a season, teams will still be interested in trying to get their hands on Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
He's too good a talent. Yeah. You're talking about a guy who practically led the league in passing on a team that finished 5-11.
They lost a lot of one-score games for lack of talent.
So my question would be this: I know Houston can block him, obviously, from playing for any other NFL team, which would be definitely ridiculous on their part. But can they block him from playing in the XFL? I don't think they can.
Good thing to pull up and research and do on another podcast.
Deshaun Watson and Cam Newton, your star quarterbacks for the new XFL.
Or go to that virtual league Johnny Manziel just signed up for.
That one's terrible. All right. We've got a whole offseason ahead of us to talk about the quarterback carousel. And, I hope you enjoyed this wonderful 2 hours of football therapy, because I certainly enjoyed presenting it to you. nextfanup@gmail.com is the way for you to get involved in this. You can win a book what's the cookbook called again, Doc?
Invite by gastro guru Jeremy Parsons, and we're giving one away.
Nice. So you're going to have to send us those emails, nextfanup@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at NFU Podcast on Twitter, facebook.com/NFU Podcast to follow us there. And our website, nextfanup.wordpress.com. And we'll have all of Doc's recipes that he's mentioned and the Super Bowl party tips. Eventually, I'll get them there, and certainly before Sunday. So probably sometime tomorrow or maybe today. Who knows? We'll see. But there you have it for James, for Doc, not for anyone else. Oh, Nick was on the show. Everybody else, go take a long walk off a short pier, you super fans,
and hunt for some salmon. Yeah.
I'm Pod Vader. There you have it.
Dear friends and colleagues, saying goodbye is never easy. I believe we can all feel proud of what we have done together, and through it all, you have maintained your professionalism and commitment and remained true to the spirit of the Charter. That principle.
We go out, we hit people in the mouth.